The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The infamous damning memo about the just terrible, disgraceful, depraved actions of the FBI has been released after being declassified by Donald Trump, and it's of absolutely no consequence. I usually, when I call something a nothing burger, I usually call it a nothing burger. Satirically, I'm making a joke about the right's use of that term. But the memo that was written by Republican Congressman Devin Nunes was seen before its release as a sort of possible destroyer of the Trump-Russia investigation. It's been released. I've looked at it. Millions have looked at it. And it's nothing. I mean, it is truly nothing in any way. And the only real impact of the memo's release and the uncertainty about the future of the U.S. political status quo vis-a-vis the Trump administration was to crash the stock market on Friday, almost a 666-point decline in the Dow Jones Industrial Average on Friday, amidst the chaos of the release of this memo that made it the biggest single-day decline in a couple of years. And beyond that, the only real consequences are to show Devin Nunes is merely the hyper-partisan bomb thrower that we actually already knew him to be, and to confirm that actually the FBI is really on to something with their investigation. This, once again, to reset for you, was the memo that was going to confirm once and for all that Robert Mueller was on a partisan witch hunt on the behalf of the FBI, and that he must be stopped. It all must be stopped, and Mueller must be fired or prosecuted or whatever. But what does the memo actually say? Well, let's go through it. The memo written by Devin Nunes alleges that the infamous Christopher Steele Trump-Russia dossier was an important part of the FISA applications against Carter Page. Again, it asserts that. It doesn't provide evidence of that. It's a memo from Devin Nunes. And even if true, it's not a huge deal, right? Since more and more of that Trump-Russia dossier from Christopher Steele has been corroborated, after all. The memo asserts that the 4 FISA surveillance applications were signed by, in different combinations, fired FBI Director James Comey, not when he was fired, right? When he was the FBI director, Andrew McCabe, Sally Yates, Dana Bunty, and Rod Rosenstein. And why wouldn't they be, right? Those were, and are some of them, important officials who would, of course, be involved in the signing of those FISA applications. The FBI, according to Devin Nunes's memo, authorized payments to a former British intelligence operative, Christopher Steele, for working on the dossier. And again, according to Devin Nunes's memo, the FBI terminated its agreement with Steele in late October when it learned through reading articles in the media that Christopher Steele had been talking to the media. Again, this is unproven because Devin Nunes is merely asserting these things in his memo without actually having provided the underlying intelligence, nor having seen it himself, but we'll get to that later. But if it's true that the FBI terminated its relationship with Christopher Steele, that indicates that the FBI acted appropriately, right? They initially hired a respected intelligence officer, and they subsequently stopped working with him when they found out that he was talking to the media. That means the FBI did the right thing. The FBI acted correctly and with integrity, not exactly the blockbuster destruction of the FBI's integrity that we were led to believe the memo would be. And Nunes alleges that the political origins of the Steele dossier were known to senior Department of Justice and FBI officials, but that the nature of that political origin was excluded from the FISA applications. That's an unproven assertion. And again, even Devin Nunes himself hasn't seen those FISA applications. So let's take the big picture of it. If the memo's claims are 100% accurate, it's still no indictment whatsoever on Robert Mueller's investigation, but the accuracy isn't known since the memo's writer, Congressman Devin Nunes, hasn't even seen the intelligence that the claims are based on. And that's a key thing, right? Nunes wrote a memo about what intelligence documents say, but those aren't documents he saw. And you don't have to take my word for that. Here's Devin Nunes on Bret Baier's Fox News program. And Bret Baier asks him, did you see the documents that you wrote about in the memo? And Nunes says, no, I didn't see them. Take a look at this.
Occur.
Did you write
so
the
it's
memo?
not a place we wanted to go. It's not a place we wanted to go, but it's where we had to go.
Did you write it?
Myself, Trey Gowdy, our two investigators, and then obviously checked by the lawyers and the rest of our committee members.
Did you read the actual FISA applications?
No, I didn't. And this has been one of these bogus news stories that have been put out. So the agreement we made with the Department of Justice was to create a reading room and allow one member and two investigators to go over and review the documents. I thought the best person on our committee would be the chairman of the Oversight Committee, Trey Gowdy, who has a long career as a federal prosecutor, to go and do this.
That's right. He didn't read them. He's trying to tell Bret Baier and the American public why it doesn't matter. Well, one person was designated to go, and we had a reading room, and these are sensitive documents. The bottom line is that the guy crying foul and saying it's all terrible, it's immoral, it's illegal, didn't read the intelligence that his own memo is based on. And before the release of the memo had the power of myth, right? The right could guess, they could predict, they could fearmonger what was actually in the memo. The memo has now been released. They can't fearmonger anymore. They just have to lie about it because the memo's contents, if true, which we don't know the truth of, it barely registers as even remotely notable. And the guy who wrote the memo, Devin Nunes, didn't even see the intelligence that the memo is supposedly based on. But for many Trumpists, it never really mattered what was in the memo, right? Fox News will still insist that it's shocking. Trump is insisting that the FBI is in tatters and the memo proves that there's no collusion, which of course has nothing to do with the content of the memo whatsoever. The Drudge Report, a right-wing online news aggregation website, has been running headline after headline about the FBI in, quote, disgrace. And the truth is, to any clear-thinking individual, that this entire so-called scandal is another laughable attempt to discredit Robert Mueller. Even ignoring that what is in the memo was totally cherry-picked and taken out of context and arguably inaccurate, if this memo is the best they can do, the entire case against Robert Mueller is just an utter and pathetic joke. And they told us it would expose corruption. It would expose crimes. It would expose horrible immorality. All that was really exposed by the memo is that Robert Mueller's investigation has a very solid basis, and there's really no reason to be concerned whatsoever about Robert Mueller as some kind of partisan hack on a witch hunt of any kind. And all of a sudden, I don't know if you saw this, but after the memo's release, Republican Congressman Trey Gowdy put out a tweet shortly after he announced he's leaving Congress altogether. And now it's all starting to make more sense. Trey Gowdy tweeted, quote, "While this memo raises serious concerns about the FISA process, I have been and remain confident in the overwhelming majority of the men and women serving at the FBI and the DOJ. As I have said repeatedly, I also remain 100% confident in Special Counsel Robert Mueller. The contents of this memo do not in any way discredit his investigation." More and more, it appears that Trey Gowdy choosing to leave Congress at this time is to get away from the atrocity of the political attempts to interfere in Robert Mueller's investigation. Even redstate.com, which is a conservative publication, is questioning the accuracy of the memo. It points out first that the memo is summarizing intelligence that we haven't actually seen, which I've been telling you as well, that Devin Nunes hasn't seen, and that we know the memo is wrong about at least one thing, which is on the public record. Check out what Devin Nunes says about James Comey's 2017 testimony. This is from the memo, okay? In Devin Nunes' memo, he writes, according to the head of the FBI's counterintelligence division, Assistant Director Bill Priestap, corroboration of the Steele dossier was in its infancy at the time of the initial Page FISA application, referring to Carter Page. After Steele was terminated, a source validation report conducted by an independent unit within FBI assessed Steele's reporting as only minimally corroborated. Yet in early January 2017, Director Comey briefed President-elect Trump on a summary of the Steele dossier, even though it was, according to his June 2017 testimony, salacious and unverified. Nunes is saying in his memo that James Comey said in June that the Steele dossier is salacious and unverified. It's just not true. We know that that's not true. James Comey never said that. Comey was asked in June of 2017 whether he had confirmed the allegations of the dossier. And Comey said he can't answer that in an open setting, and that the only time he said, and rather, the only time Comey used those words, salacious and unverified, was when he said he briefed Trump about salacious and unverified claims within the dossier. So to be perfectly clear, James Comey testified that he briefed Trump on the salacious and unverified elements of the dossier. Devin Nunes characterized James Comey as having called the entire dossier salacious and unverified. It's not true. Devin Nunes said something that either he knew to be untrue, or he deliberately distorted, or is ignorant of in his memo. And if that's the case, why do we trust anything in the memo whatsoever? The only success of this memo was creating an alternate conversation about discrediting Robert Mueller, period. The memo has exposed no wrongdoing. It has not discredited Robert Mueller as someone who cannot be trusted or is carrying out a partisan witch hunt. And maybe that's all that Republicans can hope for at this point, which is just to distract from the reality of the Trump-Russia investigation being carried out by Robert Mueller. Send me your thoughts. I'm on Twitter at dpacman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show, and we'll be talking about this more throughout the week.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Linda Taylor. Linda, thank you so much. We do depend on the support of our new members like Linda Taylor and supporting members also. Today's supporting member of the day is Matthew Enos, who has been a member since September of 2010, about 7.5 years, I guess 7.25 years or something like that. So thanks to Linda. Thanks to Matthew. We do depend on all of our members, and you can join both Linda and Matthew at davidpakman.com/membership. Also, you can make a pledge of as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/davidpakmanshow. Anything you can contribute via either means really makes a difference, because this is viewer-supported, listener-supported media. And lastly, you can contribute via cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin at davidpakman.com/cryptocurrency. Last week, I told you that we had a really, really great thing going on. The progressive musical artist named Deep Glass and their self-titled album, Deep Glass, sponsored 20 half-price memberships for David Pakman Show viewers and listeners. So the way it worked is Deep Glass has already paid half of 20 yearly memberships. A normal yearly membership costs $60. They've already paid $30 for 20 people. So we had 20 of these half-price memberships available for whoever wanted them on a first-come, first-served basis. 13 of those memberships have been spoken for already, and I have 7 left. So this is a really cool thing, and we want to try to support other progressive endeavors. Deep Glass is a progressive musical act, and you can check out the album on iTunes as well as on cdbaby.com. So number one, if you are interested in a membership and all of the great perks that come with it, the bonus show, the commercial-free audio feed, the commercial-free video feed, all of that great stuff, but the $60 a year price tag was a bit high for you, you can now take advantage of getting a membership at half price, $30. I have 7 of those left. Email me through the website, davidpakman.com, click on Contact Us and say, hey, I want one of those Deep Glass memberships. I expect they'll last maybe another 24 hours or just a little bit more. Also, please check out the album as well. Deep Glass is the artist and album, cdbaby.com and iTunes. And lastly, for every album sold, if you want to buy the album, for every album sold, until the memberships run out, Deep Glass will donate $3 to the Institute for Women's Policy Research. So very exciting stuff. I want everybody to support the band because they are supporting us, and we all want to help each other to the extent that we can. 7 half-price memberships left. Email me if you want them. Check out Deep Glass on iTunes and cdbaby.com. So let's follow up on the impact of this Devin Nunes memo. I sort of saw the Devin Nunes memo, which we've now exposed as a total nothing burger. The memo was sort of the last stand, the last attempt to take down the Robert Mueller investigation into Trump-Russia collusion. And as I told you, it was such a milquetoast and embarrassing non-blockbuster. I call it a non-burger. I like that term better than a nothing burger. It was total soy, to use the phraseology of many of the Hatriots in the audience, so to speak. The Republican Party now is effectively fully at war with the FBI. And once again, over the weekend, Donald Trump trashing the FBI on Twitter, tweeting, quote, "The 4-page memo released Friday reports the disturbing fact about how the FBI and FISA appear to have been used to influence the 2016 election and its aftermath. The FBI failed to inform the FISA court that the Clinton campaign had funded the dossier. The FBI became a tool of anti-Trump political actors. This is unacceptable in a democracy and ought to alarm anyone who wants the FBI to be a nonpartisan enforcer of the law. The FBI wasn't straight up with Congress as it hid most of these facts from investigators." Recall that Donald Trump previously referred to the entire intelligence community as equivalent to the Nazis. And this is having an impact. There's a new poll that was done for Axios, which shows that under 40% of Republicans now approve of the FBI and approve of the main federal law enforcement infrastructure of the United States. And this is not all Republicans, right? There are still reasonable Republicans who, either for reasons of self-respect or they still have some connection to the real world, are saying, wait a second, hold on. The FBI is still trustworthy. Robert Mueller has integrity. But increasingly, the Republican Party and Donald Trump are sort of in a war with the FBI and the American intelligence apparatus. And in fact, you can see the more reasonable Republicans looking to bail. We've seen a number of Republicans announcing that they're either retiring or resigning or not running for re-election. And it's very clearly the rats jumping out of the sinking ship. And just consider the positioning of this Trumpian wing of the Republican Party. They're at war with the FBI. They're at war with the intelligence community more broadly, many of them just straight up not believing the consensus assessment of multiple American intelligence agencies that Russia attempted to meddle in the 2016 election. Doesn't even mean they impacted the results, right? That they were involved in trying to sway the results, not accepting that. And you've got a whole bunch of the leadership of the Justice Department, which Donald Trump has been either pushing to resign or threatening to fire. And more than half of American voters now disagree with that. Most of the rest of the world is at odds with the hard Trumpian right. And then you also have Donald Trump, who referred to most American media as the enemy of the American people, which is straight up authoritarian talk. And meanwhile, you have Donald Trump insisting that he has great relationships with world leaders, that he will build great relationships with other world leaders if given the opportunity. Except when you actually look at the few friendly relationships that Donald Trump has with other world leaders, it's the authoritarian dictator-esque individuals like Rodrigo Duterte in the Philippines, like Vladimir Putin in Russia, Turkey's President Erdogan. These are the types of people that Donald Trump actually has alliances with. And meanwhile, those who are even tangentially connected to what we see as Western democracies are moving away from the United States. And the Trumpian right will say, that's good. We don't need them. We don't want them. But this is a war that will have impact. This entire war with the intelligence community, the firings, the threats of firings, the nothing burger memo distractions, it's all because Donald Trump doesn't respect the separation of powers, doesn't respect the independence of the Robert Mueller investigation, which he supposedly believes wouldn't turn anything up anyway because he's totally innocent. And that's where it has to come full circle for anybody who can step back and sort of see the big picture here. An innocent person doesn't upturn everything that is good and decent in terms of relationships with the intelligence community, with our law enforcement entities, over an investigation that they actually believe would eventually vindicate them. They would do the opposite, right? They would get out of the way and say, the investigation will vindicate me. I am fully cooperating, and I look forward to hearing the final report. That's not what Trump is doing. Trump is doing the opposite. And the real tragedy, as usual, is not even the normalization of this behavior, but the hyper-normalization that's going on. Because a big part of the Republican Party now, the voters I'm talking about now, they see it as totally normal for the president to demonize and to baselessly attack law enforcement agencies, to baselessly attack Robert Mueller, who is a lifelong Republican and someone that up until just months ago had the utmost respect of both Democrats and Republicans. At some previous point, this would have been unacceptable. If Obama did it, they'd have called for his un-American communist head to be burned at the stake. But it's Trump, and you've got Republicans supporting this. They're emailing me. I mentioned last week, I predict some of these hard right Trumpians will email me and they'll say, good for Trump for considering the prosecution or firing of Robert Mueller. He should be considering that. And that's exactly what I got. There's this group of a dozen or so hard right Trumpists who emailed me and they said Trump was right. The FBI's in tatters. Good for him for taking a stand and thinking about getting Robert Mueller out of there. This is a problem not only because of the facts, but it's a problem because of the normalization of what is a completely undemocratic attack on the checks and balances and supposedly independent entities that we have in American government. And the Republicans are complicit. They are absolutely complicit in this. And I just hope that eventually we will not see the further interference with the Robert Mueller investigation, because Trump and an element of the right are fully at war with those elements of the law enforcement world of the United States. It's absolutely disgusting. If it were Obama, I can't even, I'm almost speechless. Just imagine what we would be seeing and hearing if it were Obama. I want to talk a little bit about the Republican Trump tax plan. Speaker of the House Paul Ryan was totally embarrassed into deleting a tweet that he used to tout the recent enactment of the new Trump tax bill's withholding tables. You might have noticed, if you've already received a paycheck in February, that the amount of withholding taxes might have changed, and you might be getting a little more money in your paycheck. You might be getting a little less money in your paycheck, depending on your exact tax bracket and income. Paul Ryan decided to take to Twitter and to tout $1.50 per week raise for a secretary at a public high school in Pennsylvania, tweeting, quote, "A secretary at a public high school in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, said she was pleasantly surprised her pay went up $1.50 a week. She said that will more than cover her Costco membership for the year." And the satirical Twitter account, LOL GOP, cleverly responded that Charles, a Koch brother in Wichita, said that he was pleasantly surprised that his pay went up about $26 million per week as a result of the tax bill, and that this will allow him to buy several more Paul Ryans. This led to Paul Ryan deleting the tweet. Of course, we still have it to look at. Paul Ryan has been tweeting since February 1st that he wants to hear from people on Twitter now that the new federal withholding tables went into effect. He wants people to check their paychecks for their wage increases and tweet to him how much more money they are getting. And apparently Paul Ryan decided that the success story of a $6 per month increase in someone's salary was worth bragging about on Twitter. And he's been bragging. Paul Ryan has been touting the Donald Trump Republican tax bill as this sort of tremendous windfall for the American people, for the middle class. And then he handpicked the $1.50 extra per week that an individual worker was making to point out the major success that this tax bill was. And what I would really like to know is how much Donald Trump is saving on a weekly basis as a result of this tax bill. Of course, we don't know because he's never released his taxes, but I can assure you that it's much more than $1.50 per week. And this is all a combination of out of touch and depraved. And what's depraved about it is that when Paul Ryan touts $1.50 per week as a victory for the middle class, it has the impact of sort of conditioning the middle class that this is the reality, right? Even though the rich are going to get hundreds of thousands upon millions of dollars, if you're in the middle class, you should be happy with the $1.50 a week in your paycheck. You should see that as a major victory, because what Republicans are transmitting here is that this bill was a major victory for the middle class, and that $1.50 a week is representative of that victory. This is a few extra cents per hour for a 40-hour-a-week work week, and you'd better be damn happy about it if you're in the middle class, because this is what the Republican Party sees as a victory for you. It's disgusting. And it's great that Paul Ryan was embarrassed into deleting the tweet. Of course, deleting the tweet just puts more attention on it, and rightly so. And the bigger reminder I have for you today is that Paul Ryan's seat is up for grabs in November. The primary in Wisconsin is August 14th. The general election is November 6th. There are options in Wisconsin if you're not pleased with Paul Ryan and his touting of $1.50 a week increase for a secretary. Randy Bryce is running against Paul Ryan. Google him, very, very interesting candidate. Maybe send him $1.50 as a sort of figurative show of financial support. We've got to vote these people out, because $1.50 a week as a sign of victory for the middle class, when there are people saving hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in taxes as a result of this tax bill, it can't be allowed. It can't be allowed. And I know a lot of people on our subreddit are following this story. You can join them and talk about Paul Ryan or whatever else you want that's on the program today at davidpakman.com/REDDIT. We'll take a quick break and be back with a lot more right after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
2018 is Donald Trump's first full year in charge of the budget, and you'll recall that even though he was inaugurated in 2017, and for most of 2017 Donald Trump was the president, it was actually the last Obama budget that was in place. So now Donald Trump is taking over, and the headline is that the Treasury Department is set to borrow $1 trillion this fiscal year. That's going to double the borrowing of 2017. That will be the highest borrowing by the Treasury in 6 years. And the Congressional Budget Office, which is the nonpartisan office that analyzes budget-related matters, explained that this is because tax revenues are going to be lower in this fiscal year as a result of, not surprisingly, the Trump Republican tax bill, which is a major boon for the very, very rich. So the debt is going to go up even faster during this fiscal year. And the implications are, you kind of have to split it up into two parts, right? First, there's this hypocrisy of the endless Republicans who claim to be against deficits and against growing debts. And they got in the way of everything that President Obama tried to do, saying the debt, the deficit. But then as soon as Trump is president, they gladly sign into law a tax bill that increases the deficit. So point one is they're all lying hypocrites, and I've told you that before. And I've told you before that even the entire conversation around the deficit and the debt, these are political footballs, right? The truth is, the more we learn from people like Stephanie Kelton and Pavlina Cherneva, both of whom I've interviewed in the last couple of months, the more we learn about modern monetary theory, we realize that it's not as simple as debt is bad, debt down is good, objectively, without looking at why the debt might be going up or down. Many on the right insist if the debt goes up, it creates this unstoppable, undeniable, sky is falling disaster. It's inflation, it's economic sabotage, as William Shatner says, it's geopolitical self-destruction. But the truth is way more complicated. First of all, cutting doesn't create economic growth. That's number one. You can't cut your way to economic prosperity, period. But the truth is that the way that the economy and currency actually work, it's actually okay to deficit spend if you're deficit spending in the right way. So for example, growing the deficit to give tax cuts to the rich is not a good way to deficit spend. It's not economically stimulative. That's what Trump and Republicans did with their tax bill. If you decide to deficit spend to build infrastructure, not in the crony capitalist way Trump wants to do infrastructure, but if you really do an honest infrastructure bill that provides jobs to people, it strengthens the country. It better sets up the country to receive foreign tourists who want to come to the United States. That's all good, and it's deficit spending that is beneficial to the economy. So the truth is that deficit and debt are way more complex than debt is bad. But Republicans, and to some degree Democrats also, simply use it as a political football. And in the end, it's bogus. And it's particularly bogus from Republicans as they are set now to borrow a record amount of money the first year that Donald Trump's budget is dictating what the Treasury has to do in terms of borrowing. This is exactly what they said they would never do. Endless Republicans who voted for the tax cut bill said they would never, ever, ever in all their lives sign a bill into law that would increase the deficit. And they're doing it their first budget year that Obama is out of office and they finally take the reins. So first of all, the ideal thing would be for everybody to learn a little bit more about how this all works. Stop making the deficit the political football that it is, because for the American people, it's actually a pointless political football. The American people will benefit from responsible government spending when the deficit increases in a productive way, in a benevolent way, a beneficial way for the economy. That's okay. And when it's to give tax cuts for the rich, it's not okay. That's the truth of the situation. But layer two is to understand the hypocrisy, right? Bill Clinton handed George W. Bush a surplus, and George W. Bush cut capital gains and cut taxes for the rich during times of war, and we had a huge deficit. Obama started to reduce the deficit. Again, the deficit was still positive, so the debt goes up, but the deficit was reduced. And Republicans say they're all about reducing the deficit. They gave Obama no credit. Trump takes over and immediately blows up the deficit. But it's not only with the indifference of Republicans, it's with their endorsement, and it does nothing for the American people. And the misinformation that is spread around this issue is part of the problem, because you have not only so-called deficit hawks in Congress and in the Senate, You also have just random Republican voters, Libertarian voters, Tea Party voters, all of whom have also been bamboozled into cut good, deficit bad, with no real connection to the economic implications of those policies. So I guess that the New England Patriots lost in yesterday's Super Bowl. I'm not sure. I heard that they played yesterday. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But anyway, many of the players from the winning Philadelphia Eagles are already saying, it's not even been 24 hours since the end of the game, they're refusing to go to the White House to celebrate their win with President Donald Trump, which is a tradition not only for the winner of the Super Bowl, but for winners of other major sports championships. Chris Long and LeGarrette Blount, both of whom were on the winning Patriots team last year, they've already skipped the White House visit once. They're going to do it again. And then Malcolm Jenkins, as well as Torrey Smith, have said that they're not going to be attending. So good for them. And I'm not saying this or talking about this because it's hugely meaningful in the grand scheme of things. Who goes to celebrate winning a sporting event to the White House with the president? But because I do think it's important for the thin-skinned Donald Trump to be reality checked as frequently as possible, I think that this is a good thing. Tens of millions of people, maybe even hundreds of millions of people in the United States don't like Trump actively, proactively. And many of those people are the prominent people that Donald Trump would like to have good relationships with, because that's what his personality is like. He wants to be revered. He wants to be seen as a star that everyone wants to defer to. And I'm guessing that upon hearing the news that many Philadelphia Eagles are going to be boycotting the visit, he will, of course, handle it responsibly and like an adult. Yeah, right. It'll probably lead to a childish, racist rant. I have canceled the invitation to the White House to the failing, fake Philadelphia Eagles. If Martin Luther King were alive today, he would be personally thanking me for the low black unemployment rate. And the Eagles only won because the NFL referees are in tatters. The Patriots actually won. Bob Kraft is a great and not sick guy. And that's it. The Eagles don't even deserve to be here at the White House. This guy is so thin-skinned and such a snowflake that this stuff, even though it doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things, could actually set Trump off on a 6-hour tirade that, if we're lucky, gets in the way of him signing another totally abortive executive order. So listen, congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles. It was a good game. Both teams played hard, to quote, I don't remember what athlete. And I hope more of the Philadelphia Eagles say, yeah, we're just not going to go. And Chris Long pointing out, or maybe it was LeGarrette Blount, we are athletes, but we see what the president says. We can follow the news just like anybody else, and we can choose to be activists if we want to be. And one of the things we can do is not go to the White House. And 4 Eagles so far saying we won't go. And I say congratulations. Don't go. Great decision. Take a quick break. Join us on Facebook. Facebook.com/David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The San Francisco District Attorney's Office is going to either totally wipe out or look at reducing several thousand criminal convictions that are related to marijuana, some of which date back many, many decades, because in 2016, California had a ballot measure to legalize recreational cannabis in the state. And one of the things that the law allows for is the review and reduction or even removal of prior convictions for activity that would potentially be legal under the new law. And there's about 3,000 of these cases that are simply going to be dismissed. Those were prior misdemeanors. And then there's about 5,000 felony cases that are going to be reviewed. So to be clear, this is not so much about freeing people that are in jail or prison. A lot of these people never did any prison or jail time, although some of them may have. It's about getting rid of their record because it has a major impact for jobs, right? We've talked about the movements that exist in some states to ban the question about former convictions. Sometimes it's misdemeanor, sometimes it's felony only, but there's different ways in which those questions can be asked by potential employers to applicants. And there are states who have, quote, banned the box, as it's called. And this is going to be a major, major thing for a lot of people seeking employment who have these misdemeanors or felonies on their record. And it's something that we've seen this happen before, actually, where you have something that was previously illegal legalized, but there is no accommodation or consideration given to those who are who have a record for something that is no longer illegal. And there's sort of different approaches depending on what the acts are, or how the law sees those actions. But when it comes to these marijuana cases, I am 110% completely on board with this. And increasingly what we're seeing is a growing divergence between the states and the federal government on the issue of cannabis, right? You saw during the Obama administration numerous successful legalization initiatives, recreational legalization, decriminalization initiatives, legalization of medical cannabis. And by and large, the Obama administration, rather, was more friendly than prior administrations. Even though marijuana remained illegal federally, the Obama administration had directed federal law enforcement agencies to sort of stay out, take a hands-off approach to states that had legalized to different degrees cannabis, either medical or recreational, or simply decriminalized. That split when Donald Trump was elected president of the United States and selected the very, very anti-pot Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who, as I've told you previously, said he used to kind of like the KKK until he found out that they smoked pot, and that was what put him over the edge into being anti-KKK. And the federal government is moving much more harshly against marijuana. Attorney General Jeff Sessions wants to not wipe out marijuana convictions, right? California wants to wipe out marijuana convictions. This is sort of a good analogy. And Jeff Sessions wants to wipe out people using marijuana. And this has major job implications. It has, for the fiscal conservatives, major fiscal implications, because even though marijuana and property seizures related to marijuana do bring in a lot of money, the apparatus and the cost and increased size of government, and that includes DEA, ATF, Border Patrol, seizing marijuana near the border, a very, very long list of how this apparatus is huge. It's a ton of government spending. It is a huge amount of government spending and hiring and employment, all of which so-called fiscal conservatives claim to be against. And it's important to understand the underpinnings of this. It's important to understand how in some areas, some enclaves of the electorate, in the same way that you can raise a lot of money being anti-gay or being anti-abortion, you can raise money being anti-pot. It's disgusting, and I am thrilled that San Francisco's district attorney is going to take the California law as an opportunity to do this, and I hope that other California district attorneys will do the exact same thing. As you may know, every single House seat is up for re-election in November this year, as is every seat every 2 years. And there are a lot of opportunities to make positive change, to get some of the dead weight out, to put people in who might actually give a damn about what is going on for the average person. And in Illinois, it turns out that a Holocaust-denying Nazi is going to be the official Republican nominee in a congressional race that includes parts of Chicago as well as the suburbs. And I've actually previously covered this guy. He's now 70 years old. His name is Art Jones. He's been running and losing races dating all the way back to the 1970s. But in 2018, in the era of Trump, He was the only Republican to qualify for the primary in the very left-wing 3rd District of Illinois. So there's sort of two ways you can see this, right? One view is, listen, David, this is such a left-wing district that the Republican Party didn't even get involved in trying to run a more establishment candidate. And that's why it allowed this lunatic, Holocaust-denying Nazi to be the nominee. It's not an indication of how things are going. The other side of it is that's fine for the Republican Party to say now, the Illinois Republican Party, but this is the era of Trump. We never would have imagined that the xenophobic and other rhetoric from Trump would have been part of what was ultimately a successful presidential campaign. These people are emboldened. The neo-Nazi groups are emboldened. The white supremacist groups are emboldened. And it is the responsibility of the Republican Party to prevent someone like Art Jones from even being the official primary winner, nominee, official nominee, regardless of how left the district is. And reasonable people can disagree about this. Reasonable people cannot disagree about the vile and extreme nature of this guy. This is a guy who confirmed recently to the Chicago Sun-Times that the Holocaust was nothing more than a, quote, international extortion racket. He's the former leader of the American Nazi Party, and his website refers to the Holocaust, which of course included the killing of 6 million Jews, as the, quote, biggest black lie in history. The Republican Party has condemned Jones. They say they oppose his views. They say they oppose his candidacy, but they simply can't keep him off the ballot at this point. And again, no other Republicans qualified for the ballot. This guy is a known entity to groups like the Anti-Defamation League, who has been tracking him for a long time. He recently gave a speech to the National Socialist Movement, which is one of the more prominent neo-Nazi groups in the U.S., and that is National Socialism as in Nazism. It has nothing to do with the social democratic leanings of Scandinavian countries or of Bernie Sanders, right? It's important to be very, very clear about that. So it's unlikely that this guy will win. Like I said, this is a very left-leaning district, but this is the Republican candidate in this race. It's the era of Trump. Outrageous candidates with vile views have been totally normalized. And fortunately, it's a blue enough district that the Democrat should win. But very scary stuff and absolutely disgusting that this is who is going to be on the ballot for the 3rd District in Illinois. We've got a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. I mentioned that, yes, the New England Patriots were defeated yesterday in a very, very good game by the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eggman called in, and the Eggman, he's had these sort of anti-sports views for a long time. And he says we just shouldn't care, but that he believes it's good for the country that the New England Patriots lost. Take a listen to what the Eggman had to say.
Hey, Dave. I think it's kind of childish and stupid to invest any emotion in a sporting team or sporting event, one that you're not actually playing in. Any sporting team doesn't know who you are, so why do you care about them? But anyway, as stupid as it is, putting your own heart and emotion behind a national team, I think it's good that the Patriots lost because they're in the national zeitgeist. We all know who they are, whether we're smart enough to know that sports are dumb anyway. And I think it just sets the world in a more right stance. You know what I mean? Like, the Patriots losing makes the world just a little bit better. That's all.
Yeah. I don't see it that way, but listen, to each their own, and with peace and love to the Eggman, but that's not that's just not how I see it. I know that I guess only like 15% of the country wanted the Patriots to win, and then some huge percentage wanted the Eagles to win, and then some other percentage just didn't care. So I know people root against the Patriots and that Boston teams in general are often not super popular, but couldn't disagree more with the Eggman. Would have been great, but you know what? We got 5 Super Bowls. We've got 5, and Whatever. Maybe next year we'll make it. We've got a great bonus show for you today. I do want to talk about this Dodge truck commercial that aired during the Super Bowl yesterday that featured a speech from Martin Luther King, which I actually found to be in poor taste. I didn't think it was racist. I wasn't triggered into some kind of shutdown of my mental faculties. I just thought that it was in poor taste. I will talk about it on the bonus show. I also want to talk about how the number of people using Facebook in the United States, or in North America more broadly actually, has decreased for the first time, and I want to talk about the implications of that. And I also want to talk about how in New York, all 51,000 state prisoners are going to get tablet computers, which is already angering many, many people. All of those stories and more on the bonus show. davidpakman.com/membership to sign up, or patreon.com/davidpakmanshow, where you can now also get access to the bonus show. I will speak to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.